Welcome to Chapter 4. We're going to be dealing with social problems that are affecting today's K-12 environment. We're going to be dealing with everything from signs of suicide to poverty to risk factors that might affect student success in the classroom. So there are a lot of videos in this chapter, and sometimes this chapter can kind of be a bummer, I'm sorry, but you need to watch the videos because there are quiz questions from the videos. Before we start this chapter, I would like all students to watch this Dan Rather Reports, a national disgrace. It's an hour and 45 minutes. It basically sets the tone for everything that we're going to cover in this chapter. The poor Detroit public unified school system has almost every factor that we're going to talk about happening at their in their little city, actually big city. At the beginning, it starts talking about the district board. But after about 30 minutes in, you see what's happening. They'll start talking about students' lives and how it's affected them. Everything from teenage pregnancy to not social economics to everything. So please, before you start, click the red button that says Start Movie. Dealing with diversity in schools, you need to understand each family situation. You need to try to be able to communicate with the adult care of or whoever's taking care of the child, because most likely in a highly diverse community, it will probably be a single parent. You need to be careful about referring to two parents. If possible, you need to rearrange your conference schedules so that it could meet the needs of a working family. If you look, there's a link right there to a current California K-12 enrollment ethnicity and kind of what's going on. It's a mini course you don't have to take, but there's a lot of good information about the diversity of California and where we're heading. But today's classrooms, they're going to be pretty diverse. And before you jump in, you need to realize that they may not be like the family you grew up in. And I think that was the hardest thing that I had to discover. My background comes from my grandparents stayed married, my parents stayed married, my sisters, kept going on and on and on. And I walk into my first teaching job was at a very diverse elementary school. And to say, hey, when are your mom and dad going to be home? You'd get a strange look. So just be careful and let's open our minds up and we'll dive into diversity here and we'll keep going, follow along in the book and take some time to look at this website. All right. If you look at all the risk factors that basically prohibit student success, we're looking at these right here that you see on your screen. Not living with two parents. It's just hard. I'm not saying you can't do it and you can't, a lot of you guys might be single parents. That's fine. But you know how hard it is to get all the homework, to do the communication. If they're bouncing between two homes, it makes it really, really hard. Secondly, the next factor is the head of the household is a high school dropout. Boy, that's a big factor because there's no scaffolding around that child to understand how to get them all the way through high school, let alone through college. And scaffolding, basically, I mean by support. I went through college, and so I kind of know the ins and outs, and I know how to prop my kids up. If I graduated from high school, I know the ins and outs, and I could prop my kids up saying, you need to do this or you need to do that. Family income above the poverty line. I have some numbers for you coming up, but what is the poverty line? Might be surprised. Parents with no steady or full-time employment. Of course, that's granted. They're receiving welfare benefits. And lastly is no health insurance. So these are risk factors of if I'm sick all the time and I can't get to school or my parents don't take me in. Now we're providing medical for the student and we're having parents that don't take their kids in. So these are risk factors, and I think you'll see that when you watch the Detroit video, some of these kids had every one of these, and that leads to a huge problem with student success. Poverty is defined as an annual income below $23,000 for a family of four. That's about $1,900 a month, $443 a week, or $63 a day. I have seven in my family, and that wouldn't even come close, even half that. So there's our baseline. That's what poverty is. Unemployment, minimum wage job contribute to a large poor population. That's kind of the reason. And if the children fall within these poverty homes, they're going to miss school. As that video that you saw on 60 Minutes, wonderful video, tugs at my heart. Have social adjustment problems. They fall asleep. They have academic problems. On the right-hand column, you see there, I've gone through and I found some of the new census data. Basically, the poverty rate is about 14.5 right now as of 2013. The book hasn't caught up with it. Basically, the poverty rate for children under 18 fell a little bit from 21%, 21.8, rounded up to 22% in 2012 to about 20% in 2013. If you keep going through there, also another nice, a good point, I guess, is that the Hispanic poverty rate has declined or decreased in 2013. And an interesting note, extreme poverty is basically an annual income of less than $11,500 a year. It's basically about almost $1,000 a month, $959, or $221 a week. So, this is the funny thing is when you put it on a day, it's $32 a day for a family of four. I'm not sure how you could even survive on that. Teachers and schools dealing with poverty, they need to provide some emotional support and advice for the poor, homeless, and runaway students. You're going to be surprised about how many kids approach you about being hungry. They have a home, they have a car, they have clothing, but everything's going to pay for that, but they might be wondering day to day where they're going to get their food. So be prepared for that. How to report abuse report child abuse. You also need to be aware of cultural mismatches between the middle class schools and the poor students. On the next slide, you're going to see some hidden rules of generational poverty. There's things that different classes value. The book does a good job talking about the cards and negatives and positives, but you need to be aware of this because you don't know where you're coming from and where your students are. Again, I got to tell you, my first year teaching, it was a real eye-opener that students didn't grow up the way I did. Well, as the kids get older, we deal with teens, at-risk teens. Some of the big deal, again, we have poverty, especially unmarried teen mothers. I always use the word student success because that's kind of the new drop term. Unfinished education or interrupted. There's are some signs of some at-risk students. Risks, premature babies, stress of parenting, school, and job. These are all things that you got to deal with, especially if you're the junior high school, of what to watch for and work for your kids. I say work for your kids is that kind of that's what we do. You're their advocate. When you're in that classroom, I always took it as I'm going to do all I can. And if there's an avenue I need to go down to get you help, I'm going to do it. Many schools provide a lot of support for teenagers that become pregnant or even pre-care so that they don't get pregnant. There's a big debate right now, where should this happen? Should it happen at home or should it happen in the schools? I really can't enter in that debate. I mean, I can do what I want to do with my children, but the public schools have entered that arena. You'll see in most high schools, at least in Clovis Unified and in Fresno, there's a building kind of hidden out in the back, which is kind of sad, where we put our teenage parents that have had kids, and what we do is they can bring their kid to school, they can enter high school and do all the stuff they need to and check on their children. We can provide care for them, parenting advice, and allows the teen to stay into school. If you're in a K-12 environment, elementary, you're going to see those yearly videos that come out. You'll have to be in there with your students. The female teachers go with the female and the male teachers go with the male. Happened my 6th grade year. I was totally unprepared for it. And they show videos to the young kids. Get to junior high, high school, they have more laid out curriculum for the science teachers to teach or the health teachers. There's a whole bunch of curriculum out there, everything from abstinence to, on the book we talk about abstinence plus, to full-on context of what's going to happen, everything from contraception to disease and disease prevention. As we all know from our media, this generation is really exposed to sexual innuendos, and it's really blasted down. So they're really trying to adjust of what is reality and what isn't. Everybody remembers their high school experience. Just magnify that by a whole bunch, because that's what these kids are going through. Signs of potential child abuse is a big one, because the whole time you're trying to foster this connection with the parents and the child, and all of a sudden you're seeing these injuries that are happening, these bruises, these welts, burns, neglect, stealing food, staying awake, or you hear him talk, I was up all night playing video games. Academic performance starts to drop, disruptive behaviors, withdrawal from the class. These are all things that are signs of child abuse, and you as a teacher are obligated to report them. Tell your principal will take you through the process. I highly suggest that you talk with your observation teacher and say, you know what, my teacher asked us to talk with you about what happens when you maybe have some suspicions that a child might be being abused. And you don't want to turn a parent in that it's not for sure, but you're obligated. It's a tough decision, but usually 9 times out of 10, you start seeing the bruises and the welts and the burns. And I remember one time I had a student, I was coming home from an event I had to go to on a weeknight, school night, and it was late, it was midnight, and I saw the student walking home from 7-Eleven, and boy, that was the first big light that went off, and I'm saying, we got problems. I already had some academic problems with the student, and he was falling asleep in class. So what I did, I went to my principal and we turned them in. But it's anonymous. We worked with the student, and believe it or not, it turned out to be a better situation in the end. It's so hard to think about, but when you're in a classroom, you might have to deal with suicidal kids or suicidal issues or warning signs. It's a good thing to be aware of these signs. You know, when you hear kids talking about death or suicide, or they're just, they're fascinated by it, seeking access to firearms or pills, or, all of a sudden rage, rebellious activities. I had a student once that was just a pristine student and all of a sudden started doing all these things so far, expressing no purpose for life or living. Drugs or alcohol abuse, easily agitated, inability to sleep. These are just some of the signs. I'm going to continue on the next slide, but I'm going to show you a video here about some suicide. It's the empty chair. As we continue with the warning signs, we need also to look for dramatic mood changes, persistent boredom, concentration problems. Basically, work quality starts to go down. Engaging in risky behavior, loss of interest, withdrawal from friends or family. All these are signs that you need to do something. And if you just need some help, there's the National Suicide Prevention Line, which is 1-800-SUICIDE. There's a lot of people out there. Start talking with the kids, figure out what's going on in their life, and if you need help, there's people out there that can help you assist diagnose a student in your class. The best way to reduce the threat of school violence is to basically start with your staff and students and parents and start goals, get their input, establish some norms of high expectations, and then basically you're going to enforce those and high performance and goals. They need to be fair, they need to be firm, consistent throughout the whole entire school. And you need to basically create a culture that supports the value of honesty, integrity, kindness, and respect for others. You'll see in some of the Clovis Unified School Districts and Fresno, you're going to see that they have a character counts and they push it really hard in the elementary schools. Basically, it's talking about the integrity, the honesty of kids, and kindness and respect for others. It's a program throughout, and I think has done wonders. I've put 5 kids through so far, and they understand it. being a high school and community college teacher for years, you can see when kids get to the point of dropping out. There's contributing factors that are there. There are poor grades, dislike for school, alienation, marriage, pregnancy, unemployment, and they go on. Usually what happens is the warning signs, it's real obvious. They just stop coming, or they're sporadic. The work just kind of goes, their quality goes down. They're preoccupied with outside things. Basically my whole deal is I find those kids and you get them involved. You get them involved and you show interest in them and you ask them every day, how are you doing? I had a famous coach who would always say, what wins have you had today? Because every day you have to have a win. He was a great man in my life, and I use it on these kids as well. Basically, kids that drop out are going to have a very hard road ahead of them. The video that you saw beforehand, it was a 4-minute video, and if you went right through it, I encourage you to go back and watch it. It's a very powerful video.